times we had, oh, when the wind would blow.
Hello, I've been here for over 5 weeks now, so I think I can talk sufficiently about the Italian social life and conduct. I've done quite a few touristy things recently. I've been to Milan, to Venice, and I've been to Gardaland, which is the theme park near here. But I think that I've integrated into Italian social life sufficiently enough to talk about it. So in this video I'm going to talk about La Dolce Vita, my integration into Italian society, and of course socialising. I'm in Piazza dell'Erbe at the moment, which is one of the most popular places in Verona to go for cocktails and aperitivo. The Italian way of life is all about pleasure and indulgence, which I think can be pared down to food, wine, architecture and the gorgeous language. Of course, there are two sides to life in Italy, the relaxed, luscious side, and the arguably corrupt bureaucracy and lack of punctuality, which is demonstrated by the world-infamous Berlusconi. I read somewhere that the Italians have a hedonistic attitude to life, in the sense that a plate of perfectly cooked risotto is more important than the speed of the postal system, and I definitely think that this is true. The lack of punctuality in Italy is problematic for the government, but a couple of weeks ago it's quite useful for me because I was trying to sort out my timetable, and one of the classes I wanted to take finished when another started, which I couldn't do because there's a 10-minute walk between the two faculties. However, I tried out more and more lectures and I began to realise that classes seemed to be finishing early and starting late, which meant that I could do both. This attitude does carry into some of the offices, however, which I found issues with, especially when I've had to get forms signed, and all the offices seem to close at 1 o'clock or earlier because they shut up early. I think that La Dolce Vita is predominantly epitomised through the language known as the language of love, because it's just such a melodic and beautiful language. I mean, King Charles V said that he would speak to women with the Italian language as opposed to German, French or Spanish, and I can see why. It's just such a lavish language, and it epitomises everything about the relaxed way of life in Italy, and the more I learn the language, the more I want to become engrossed in the culture here. I have many points of integration into the Italian way of life. First of all, I live in a stereotypically Italian apartment with 2 Italian girls, and whilst this could be problematic in the sense that we may have different cultural values, I've not found any issues at all so far. I've also had to do with failing electricity, because the Italian system with electricity is that there are 2 tariffs, and if you plug too many appliances in, you're immediately defaulted to the lower tariff. So for example, if I was to plug the kettle in and all the lights were on, the lights might dim. Speaking of kettles, I still have yet to buy one, and I've been having to boil my tea, or the water for my tea, on the hob, which is quite hard as I've frequently spilt it upon myself, but kettles don't seem to be a commonplace thing here. Secondly, I've had to deal with the logistics of living in Italy, for example, buying things with my codice fiscale or setting up bank accounts, and I've particularly bought 2 internet keys, because the first one didn't seem to work, and I'm still trying to find a perfect way of communication with England, so when I found one I will let you know. Thirdly, I go to university where the cultural differences and the way of life is just so different to in England, and I could talk about this at great length, so I'll save that for another time. But related to that, potentially, well, my greatest way of integration into Italian society is socialising. For me as an Erasmus student, there are 2 ways of socialising here, with other Erasmus students and with the locals. And perhaps as time goes by, my direction of socialising will lean more towards the locals, but at the moment it's mainly Erasmus students. All the Erasmus students seem to stick together to their own countries. For example, all the English with the English and all the Spanish with the Spanish. And as I know very little about the ways in which the other countries socialise, I can't really talk at great length about that, but I can say that I have seen a lot of drunk Erasmus students stumbling home. One way I think that the Italians demonstrate their vivacity in life is through the socialising. I haven't been mixing with Italians for very long, but it's very noticeable from the start how different their attitude to alcohol is as compared to England. Of course, all these us and them comparisons are mass generalisations, but I really do think there is some grounding in it. Alcohol is obviously a large point for socialising, and here in Italy there is the culture of the aperitivo. For around €4 or €5, you get an alcoholic drink and an unlimited access to the spread of food in the bar: bruschetta, pasta, ham and cheeses. The clubbing life here is supposedly better than that at home, according to some of my friends,
And I've only been to one club so far, but based on that alone, I can definitely agree. This club's called Alter Ego, and it's on the top of a hillside in Verona. You have a 360-degree view of the city. It's all lit up at night. It's absolutely beautiful. The building's quite similar to, well, basically a giant conservatory with lots of different rooms. There's lots of glass and there's lots of bars. And as well as a music room, there's sort of a live music room where it's much more relaxed, which I like that aspect. You are able to actually have a conversation. It's supposedly a European renowned club, but your shoes do get just as sticky as they would on the Warwick SU floor.
The only thing Italy is lacking is an equivalent of a pub. The loud music in the campus pub means that it is more of a bar than a pub. Instead, bars are commonplace. One of my favourite bars is called Caffè al Teatro Filarmonico. It is more of a cafe, as it closes at 9 o'clock, but despite this, it has my favourite aperitivo in Verona. There's also Cambridge Bar right outside the university, where the aperitivo is pretty good as well.
Here in Italy, the relaxed way of socialising is almost definitely due to the relationship with alcohol. Italian children are given wine from a really young age, watered down albeit, but still given wine, and I therefore don't think that it seems to hold as much mystique here as it does in England. There doesn't seem to be much binge drinking, and there's no desire to do something crazy. Wine's sampled as a delicacy rather than as a means to getting drunk, and I think that this links to the Italian philosophy of la bella figura, which means beautiful figure. And whilst this is just to do with appearance, it also does correlate towards behaviour and proper behaviour. And I think that it emphasises a sort of self-control. And whilst this philosophy probably will crop up again and again in my stay here, I really think that it relates to the idea and the behaviour of drinking alcohol as well. There's probably a simpler explanation as to why Italians don't seem as drunk, and that's because there's such an emphasis on food here, and food seems to be held on a pedestal, and it's not really that scientific to know that if you eat before you drink, you don't get as drunk. So with what's probably a very long video, I'll say a presto and ciao.